In the next few minutes, I'll show you everything you need to know to use the DJI Osmo Pocket 4P properly, what hidden features it has, what the best settings are, and how to get the most out of the Pocket 4P. This guide is divided into 15 parts. These correspond to the 15 best features and strengths of the Pocket 4P. If you would like to rewatch or rewind to any part of this guide at any time, I put timestamps down below to make this easy. And if you want to find out more detailed information about the DJI Pocket 4P or pick it up, you will also find links to do that in the video description. Let's start with the camera's design and how to set it up before using it for the first time. There are a few important things you should know about this. The Pocket 4P comes in the standard packaging with the handle, this carrying pouch and the fill light. The vlog combo also includes a DJI Mic Mini 2 transmitter with accessories for the microphone, a mini tripod, this high quality carrying bag and the Osmo frame tab, which is used as a remote control. When you take the camera out of the box, the gimbal is in a sort of lock mode, but it can still be moved. Unlike the Pocket 4, the Pocket 4P does not come with a gimbal clamp or any additional protection. You should therefore always store the camera carefully in the carrying pouch when transporting it and after use. The camera has a USB-C port on the bottom. You can use it to charge the camera or attach the handle. When attaching the handle, make sure that the button is on the front. You can remove the handle again by pressing the button. The handle mainly extends the camera so that it is easier to hold, but it has another important advantage. It has a 1/4 inch thread on the bottom, which you can use to attach the Pocket 4P to a tripod. For example, to the small tripod that comes with the vlog combo. If necessary, there is also a longer battery handle available that extends the camera's runtime. The Pocket 4P can shoot in 4K 30 for more than 2 hours and 40 minutes. That's why I think the standard handle should be sufficient for most people. When the handle is installed, you'll find the USB-C port for charging the camera on the back. You can also connect accessories to the USB-C port or connect the Pocket 4P to a computer. The SD card slot is located on the left side. You can easily pull out the cover with your fingernail. You don't really need SD cards for the Pocket 4P, as it has 103 GB of internal storage. That has always been enough for me so far, but of course it's probably not enough for a longer trip. And in that case, you should use a fast SD card. To ensure that the camera works properly even when shooting in high resolution, I recommend cards with a speed rating of A2 and V30, such as this card from Lexar. You can find a link to it in the video description. The Pocket 4P has 3 buttons and a joystick. Here on the right is the shutter button. On the left is the joystick, which you can also press like a button. If you turn the display to the side, you'll find the zoom button below the display on the left and a customizable button on the right that you can set up according to your needs. I think it has very useful functions in the default settings, which we'll see in a moment. The camera is attached to the top of the gimbal, and the gimbal has a magnetic connector on the back where you can attach the fill light. The fill light does not have its own battery and is charged via the gimbal arm and turns on automatically when you turn on the camera. As you know, the Pocket 4P actually has 2 cameras and lenses. A wide-angle main camera, which is located at the bottom, and a 3x telephoto lens. We'll come to the special characteristics of the 2 lenses and the zoom function in a moment. Once you have charged the Pocket 4P sufficiently, you can turn it on and activate it. There are 2 ways to turn on the Pocket 4P: by turning the screen to the right, or by pressing the record button. When you turn on the Pocket 4P by pressing the record button, it starts in portrait mode in the default settings, meaning it's set up to take vertical videos. You have to activate the Pocket 4P at the beginning. To do this, you need to connect it to the DJI Memo app. You can find it on the DJI homepage or in the app stores. After downloading the DJI Memo app, connect your Pocket 4P and you can now activate it. With the Memo app, you can fully control the Pocket 4P. The app also includes a few special features, which I will show you at the end of the video. And also very important, you can use the app to install the latest firmware update. You should do this, because updates not only fix bugs, but also add new features. If an update is available, it will be displayed here and you can install it. The Pocket 4P is very easy to operate using the buttons and the touch display. You can, of course, start and stop recording with the record button. If you press and hold the record button during recording, the current recording will not only be stopped, but also deleted immediately. If on the other hand, you press and hold the record button during normal operation, you can use it to turn off the Pocket 4P. The joystick also has several functions. By moving it to the left, right, up or down, you can control the gimbal and thus the actual camera. If you move the joystick only slightly, the camera will rotate very slowly. But if you push it all the way to the side, for example, the camera will move faster. If you press the joystick twice quickly, the gimbal will automatically return to its starting position. If you press it 3 times quickly, the gimbal will rotate around its own axis into selfie mode and you can take a selfie. If you press it 3 times again, the camera will rotate back to the front. If you are in a menu, you can exit the menu by pressing the joystick once. The Pocket 4P also has a zoom function. To activate it, tap the icon with the control pad on the right side. It will then turn into a circle with plus and minus signs, and you can zoom in and out by pressing the joystick up or down. The left-hand button below the display is the zoom button. We'll take a closer look at that in a moment. The right-hand button is customizable, but is already set up quite well. If you press it once, the joystick switches to zoom mode. If you press it again, it switches back to normal joystick mode, just as if you were tapping the zoom field on the right side. Press it twice and the camera centers itself, which is the same function as pressing the joystick twice. However, I prefer to use the button for this. If you press the button 3 times, you activate the lock mode for the gimbal. This means that it no longer follows any movements and the camera looks straight ahead. This is useful for making simple camera movements, such as a dolly forward or sideways. And if you press and hold it, you slowly zoom out. All the other functions of the Pocket 4P are operated via the touch display. Swiping down from the top opens the control menu. Here you can activate several important features. We'll take a closer look at the most important ones today. Swiping from left to right gives you a preview of your recordings. You can view your clips here, add them to your favorites by tapping the heart icon, and of course you can also delete your recordings here. Swiping from bottom to top allows you to set the most important recording settings, such as resolution and frame rate. Swiping from the right edge to the left opens the menu with the image and audio settings. Earlier we rotated the camera by pressing the joystick 3 times. You can also rotate the camera by tapping the small camera icon at the bottom right. And then there is another important feature. If you tap the icon at the bottom left, you can select the recording mode. There are different recording modes. You can take panorama photos, normal photos, slow motion recordings, and also time-lapse and hyperlapse recordings. But you will mostly use the Pocket 4P in video mode. That's why we're going to focus on that today. But very important, there is a separate recording mode for low light. This means that in poor lighting conditions, such as in the evening or indoors, you should use this mode for better results. Before we look at the optimal settings for video recordings, I'd like to briefly highlight the differences between the two cameras and explain the zoom function in more detail. I'd say that the main camera on the Pocket 4P is the wide-angle camera. Only this camera has a large 1-inch sensor. It therefore performs somewhat better in low-light conditions than the telephoto camera, whose 1/1.28-inch sensor is significantly smaller. In addition, only the wide-angle camera supports the new D-Lock 2 lock mode, enabling up to 17 stops of dynamic range. On the other hand, the telephoto lens with f1.8 has a slightly larger aperture than the wide-angle lens with f2. Nevertheless, I tend to use the wide-angle camera in low-light conditions. With a 20mm focal length, the wide-angle main camera is very well suited for vlogging. But the 20mm focal length is, of course, not ideal for close-ups of faces, if only because of the distortion. With a 60mm focal length, which corresponds to a 3x zoom factor on the camera, the Pocket 4P features a telephoto lens that's not only excellent for getting closer, but is also ideal for portrait shots, that is close-ups of faces. The long focal length and wide aperture result in a beautiful background compression and a very nice background blur. The minimum focusing distance of 20 cm also allows you to take macro-like close-ups. Only the telephoto lens then features a 2x lossless zoom. This means that at 6x or 120mm you'll still get very good image quality, since only a smaller portion of the high-resolution sensor is used. You can therefore achieve good results even at 6x. All other zoom factors between 1x and 3x, 6x or even above 6x, however, result in a digital crop and a noticeable reduction in image quality. You should therefore avoid using them if possible. There are several ways to zoom in and out with the Pocket 4P. If you tap the small icons labeled 1x or 3x, you'll switch between the two lenses. If you tap the icon on the right side, you'll switch to the joystick zoom mode. Now you can zoom in and out gradually by pushing the joystick up and down. This isn't ideal, as it almost inevitably results in a digital crop. Therefore, you should use the left zoom button below the display to zoom instead. If you press and hold it, you'll zoom in gradually, similar to using the joystick. If you press it once, however, you'll switch back and forth between the wide-angle lens and the telephoto lens. If you press the button twice, you'll activate the telephoto lens 6x lossless zoom. And you should really only use these 3 zoom levels: 1x, 3x and 6x. If you press the button one more time, the camera will return to 1x. We'll see in a moment that to get the best possible results with the Pocket 4P, you need to shoot in log. Log footage needs to be corrected and edited, which takes some experience. Personally, I've learned most of what I know from online tutorials. A fantastic platform for that is Skillshare, and a big shout out to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is a platform with thousands of classes on all kinds of topics. For me personally, the classes on filmmaking and creativity are of course the most important. What really helped me was Fred Trevino's class on color grading. It's a perfect introduction for anyone who doesn't have much experience with it yet. I myself started filmmaking relatively late, and it took me a long time to really master color grading, and I can tell you that Fred Trevino's class is the perfect place to start. But of course, there are also many other classes on specific video editing programs like DaVinci Resolve. What I especially like about Skillshare is that the classes are human-made and you learn from real people. But Skillshare isn't just about filmmaking, of course. There are classes on all kinds of topics. There are also classes on finance and business, art and illustration, and even personal development. And I have a great offer for you today. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. That means you can simply give it a try for free and with no obligation. So feel free to check it out if you'd like to learn more about a specific topic. The outstanding image quality of the Pocket 4P is one of its particular strengths. This is especially true in video mode. You can influence the image quality by adjusting the various recording settings. However, there is no single setting that is optimal for all situations. We will therefore take a closer look at the recording settings, and I will explain how they affect the image quality. First, you need to decide whether you want to shoot in portrait mode or horizontally in landscape mode. There are several ways to switch to portrait mode for vertical videos. As mentioned, you can turn on the Pocket 4P with the record button. It will then activate directly in portrait mode. If, on the other hand, you are in landscape mode and rotate the screen upwards and interrupt the shutdown with continue, the camera will also switch to portrait mode. And the third option is via the control menu. To do this, swipe down from the top. You can use this icon at the top to set the orientation permanently. The camera will now always work in this orientation, regardless of how you turned it on or how you rotated the screen. This is particularly useful if you only shoot in a specific orientation. Okay, let's now take a look at the resolution and frame rate. To do this, swipe your finger from bottom to top. For optimal results, you should always use the highest possible resolution, which would be 4K. If you use the Pocket 4P in portrait mode, the highest resolution is 3K. The following applies to the frame rate. The more frames per second, the smoother and more natural your recording will look. But low frame rates of 24 or 25 frames per second are considered particularly cinematic because they are used to shoot professional movies. For a cinematic look, you should therefore use 24 or 25 frames per second. But be aware, if you don't use ND filters, a low frame rate can lead to a very choppy and jerky look, especially in daylight and when there is a lot of movement in the shot. With the help of ND filters, you can create motion blur. Only then will a shot with a low frame rate look cinematic and natural. That's why in these situations, I would only recommend such a low frame rate in combination with ND filters. A higher frame rate of, for example, 50 or 60 frames per second not only gives you a very smooth and natural look, but also allows you to create slow motion shots of up to 40%. But a higher frame rate not only needs more storage, it also uses more power and is a disadvantage in low light. So if you don't really need it, I'd advise against it. If you're not sure which frame rate to use at first, I'd recommend starting with 30 frames per second. This looks relatively smooth and does not have the disadvantage of high frame rates. And the Pocket 4P can shoot extremely cool slow motion footage in 4K at up to 240 frames per second, which is also great for B-roll shots. But to do this, you have to use the slow motion shooting mode. There are 3 things you should know about shooting in slow motion mode. The slow motion mode results in a slight crop, so the field of view is slightly smaller. The recordings are saved directly in slow motion and they do not contain any audio. The sound is saved in a separate file. This mode is therefore not really suitable for normal recordings and you should only use it if you actually need a slow motion recording. Let's return to the standard video mode. For the advanced image and audio settings, we need to swipe from the right edge to the left. Here you can activate glamour effects. Once you have activated this feature, you can use the Memo app to smooth the skin, make the face or nose smaller, and so on. But you won't see the effect in the preview. To apply the effect, you have to connect the Pocket 4P to the DJI Memo app after recording and apply the effect. I find the Beautify filters a little more useful. These mainly affect skin tones. There are effects for smoothness or brightness of the skin tones, and you can even change the color of the skin tones. It is also possible to activate more than one filter at the same time. Whatever you think of them, the effects are well implemented, and you can actually improve your appearance with them, at least at my age. Similar to the glamour effects, a face icon appears in the upper right corner when the feature is active. Pay attention to this, because in this case, you can no longer undo the effect in post if it is activated by mistake. The film tones are also very cool, giving your recording a cinematic look. You can choose between 6 different filters, such as CC Film, NC Film or Pastel. It's also useful that you can adjust the intensity of the filter here on the left. They look good, but I wouldn't overdo it. If you change the focus during a recording, you can often tell by the fact that the field of view changes slightly and zooms in and out slightly. This doesn't look very professional. This is called focus breathing. To prevent or reduce this, you can activate breathing compensation here, but this also leads to a slight crop of the image, so only use it if you really need it. The Pocket 4P, like any other camera, processes the images before saving them. The contrast at the edges is increased, which means sharpness is added and image noise is removed. Image noise mainly occurs when shooting in low-light conditions. If you tap on Image Adjustment, you can influence these 2 adjustments. You can add or remove sharpness, or you can also reduce or increase noise reduction. If your goal is to take particularly cinematic shots, you should reduce the sharpness even further. But be careful, this will make the image very soft, and it may be necessary to add sharpness in post. Personally, I don't find that the Pocket 4P's shots look overly sharp or digital. I therefore don't think it's absolutely necessary to reduce the sharpness further. Earlier, we saw that there is a separate shooting mode for low light. In low light mode, image noise is significantly reduced. This often improves the image quality considerably. However, there are situations, such as indoor shots, where it is difficult to judge whether the low light mode is really useful or not. This is precisely why the low light image enhancement feature is very useful. When activated, the camera automatically detects whether it is necessary to apply stronger noise reduction or not. I would therefore activate this feature, but it is only available if you are shooting at a maximum of 30 frames per second and are not using film tones. To adjust the exposure and white balance manually, you need to activate the Pro mode. Tap on Exposure and then on Manual. The setting on the left is for the shutter speed, and the setting on the right is for the ISO value. But today I want to show you a few things in automatic mode. When the camera focuses on your face, it also adjusts the exposure accordingly. This usually works quite well, but sometimes it causes the background and the whole image to be slightly overexposed. If this bothers you, you can set an exposure compensation here on the left under EV and, for example, set a slightly negative value. The automatic exposure will now expose the image slightly darker. And here's a tip. You can easily correct the exposure even while shooting. To do this, swipe from the right to the left while shooting. Now you can use the slider on the right to adjust the exposure to the optimum level and correct it up or down. This is an important function. The colors in the Pocket 4P standard mode are very nice, and the dynamic range is also relatively good. However, the Pocket 4P offers you 3 additional color profiles. D-Log 2 in particular is a brand new feature, and only with D-Log 2 can you achieve the promised 17 stops of dynamic range. But before we get to the 2 D-Log profiles, a few words about HDR. With HDR, highlights in particular are displayed significantly brighter than in the standard color profile. This creates extremely high contrast and a very natural look. However, this is only possible if the display on which you're playing back the video is also HDR capable, such as the screen of a modern smartphone or a modern TV. Here you can clearly see the difference. If, on the other hand, you play back your footage on a non-HDR capable display, or use it for a longer project, the HDR footage will be converted and you won't see any difference. HDR therefore makes the most sense if, for example, you frequently want to view your footage on a smartphone. What's particularly interesting is that the Pocket 4P is the first DJI consumer camera to feature 2 flat log profiles, D-Log and D-Log 2. Both are flat 10-bit color profiles that offer a higher dynamic range than the standard color profile and are ideal for color grading. But there are a few key differences between the 2 color profiles. Only with D-Log 2 can you achieve the incredible dynamic range of 17 stops, which matches that of a professional cinema camera. D-Log and D-Log 2 are 2 completely different color profiles. They likely even use different color spaces. They also require different exposure settings for optimal results. While D-Log supports fully automatic exposure, this is not the case with D-Log 2. The ISO value must always be set manually, and the ISO range is also different. The results with the same settings look very different. On top of that, the Pocket 4P's telephoto lens doesn't support D-Log 2, so if you're shooting with both lenses and want to match the footage, it's not that easy. But of course, only D-Log 2 gives you the Pocket 4P's incredible dynamic range. Personally, I prefer D-Log 2 and found it easier to get good results with it. The automatic exposure tends to underexpose, and I've often gotten the best results with an exposure compensation of +1. DJI offers multiple LUTs for download for both log profiles, which convert the log footage into footage with contrast and saturation. I'll include a link to these LUTs in the description below. If you enable color recovery here, you can see in the preview what the recording will look like after conversion. Note that color recovery has no effect on the actual recording. And there's something else you should know. When you use D-Log or D-Log 2, the Pocket 4P won't adjust the exposure as well on your face, so I wouldn't shoot in D-Log when vlogging. The Pocket 4P's large sensor creates a blurred background when the subject is in the foreground. The camera therefore has an autofocus that keeps the subject in focus at all times. The yellow frame also shows you when a subject has been detected. You can also focus on a subject by tapping on it on the display. Then the focus and exposure will adjust to the new subject. And if you tap and hold, you'll lock the exposure, but the focus will still change as the scene changes. If you want the focus to remain fixed once it has been set on the subject, select Single under Focus Mode. This is very useful for creative camera movements or shooting motionless subjects, for example. If on the other hand, you're using continuous autofocus and want the camera to focus only on subjects in the foreground, you can activate the Product Showcase mode. And the Pocket 4P has two more focus tracking features that you should definitely know about. Both are particularly useful when you want to take a shot with several people in the frame. When you activate subject lock tracking, the camera detects all the faces in the image. You can then simply tap on a face and the camera will now keep the focus on that person and not be distracted by the other faces, and unintentionally focus on another face during the course of the recording. And when you activate Registered Subject Priority, you can register a subject, such as a person or a face. To do this, open the control menu, swipe left and tap the icon in the upper left corner. Here you can add a subject. The camera will now remember the subject or face and give it priority when focusing, even if there are several people in the frame. A great feature, but don't forget, this only works if you have activated the feature under Focus Mode. Since today's goal is to set up the Pocket 4P perfectly for optimal results, you should definitely set the bitrate to high. To do this, you have to open the control menu, then the settings menu at the bottom left, and now you can set the bitrate to high. This will make the recording files larger, but it's the only way to ensure that as much information as possible is stored. Once you have optimized the Pocket 4P for your needs, you can save your settings as a preset so you can quickly access them again at any time. To do this, open the control menu again. Now tap on the icon with the person and then on the plus sign. Here you can save multiple presets. This way you can save different settings that are optimal for different situations. The really cool thing about the Pocket 4P is that the combination of gimbal and camera enables functions that would not be possible with another standard camera. And we'll take a look at these functions now. One of these features is Active Track. With Active Track, the camera automatically follows a person or a subject. This allows you to track yourself or perform beautiful camera movements. Unlike focus tracking, this feature is not just about focus. You can set up the camera anywhere and it will follow you using the gimbal. You activate the function by double tapping the subject to be tracked on the display. A green frame appears. If necessary, you can adjust the position of the subject slightly with the joystick. This is usually necessary because you generally don't want the face to be in the center of the frame, but rather towards the top. To deactivate Active Track again, tap the display once more or press the joystick once. But there's another extremely useful way to start tracking. If a face is in the frame and has been detected, all you need to do is press the joystick once. The camera will then activate what's called frame tracking, a brilliant feature. In this case, the subject is kept exactly where it was when tracking was activated. For example, with the head at the top edge and in the right third of the frame. No further adjustments using the joystick are necessary. There are two things you should definitely know about active tracking. The range of movement of the gimbal is not unlimited. Especially to the left, it quickly reaches its limit and will no longer be able to follow you. In addition, the combination of tracking and camera movement is not optimal. For example, if you hold the Pocket 4P in your hand while vlogging and walk and track yourself at the same time, this can lead to slight jerkiness in the recording. For a more stable recording while walking or running, you should disable tracking. But of course, the gimbal can do much more than just track. The Pocket 4P gimbal has 4 different stabilization modes. To understand them, let's take a quick look at how the gimbal works. The gimbal has 3 axes. A pan axis that allows sideways movements, so panning from one side to the other. A tilt axis that allows movements from top to bottom. And a roll axis that allows sideways rotations. When you press and hold the joystick, all axes are locked and the gimbal stabilization function is disabled. There is another lock mode. As we've already seen, you activate this by pressing the customizable button 3 times. Now the camera's position is locked and the gimbal compensates for all movements. This is well suited to simple camera movements, such as a forward or sideways dolly shot. For the other modes, open the control menu again and tap the gimbal icon at the bottom right. In follow mode, only the roll axis is locked, so you can use the gimbal to perform lateral movements as well as smooth up and down movements. This mode is particularly useful when following a person or filming yourself, for example. In tilt locked mode, on the other hand, the tilt axis is locked. This means that the camera can only move sideways. Up and down movements are compensated for by the gimbal. In FPV mode, the roll axis is also active, allowing you to perform sideways turns. This is useful for creative shots, for example. In this FPV mode on the right, the camera quickly and directly adapts to the direction of the touchscreen. This is well suited for vlogging, for example. But that's not all the gimbal has to offer. The Pocket 4P also has a few intelligent gimbal features. You should be familiar with these as well to get the most out of the Pocket 4P, especially if you want to film yourself frequently. For example, when vlogging, it is useful if the camera automatically recognizes your face and immediately starts tracking without you having to select yourself as the subject each time. With multi-person tracking, up to 8 people can be detected and the camera tracks the subject in the center. When you activate Spotlight Follow, the camera recognizes a face near the center of the frame and automatically starts tracking. Here too, previously registered subjects are detected first, and the camera only tracks an unregistered subject if it does not detect any registered subjects. What I don't like so much about this feature is that the face is kept in the center of the image. This is not always the optimal framing. For better framing, the face should be closer to the top edge or, according to the rule of thirds, even on the left or right side at the top edge. To make this possible, you can use the joystick to adjust the position of the subject while recording, or you can use the dynamic framing feature. Here, you use the joystick and the 9 dots to select where you want your subject to be positioned in the frame. For example, at the top left. Press the joystick to confirm the position. Your subject will now be automatically held in this area of the image, and it works very well. This is a very useful feature that you should definitely remember. Using Spin Shot, the gimbal performs an automated rotation. In the case of 90 degrees, this is a lateral rotation, either to the left or to the right. And in the case of 180 degrees, it is a rotation around its own axis, whereby the camera lens rotates upwards. This function is again more suitable for creative shots. Personally, I rarely use it. Earlier we saw that the camera automatically starts tracking a subject with Spotlight Follow when a face is detected within the frame. When you open the control menu, you will find the FT Selfie feature on the second page. This feature also automatically starts tracking a face. In this case, however, tracking starts automatically when you rotate the camera backward into selfie mode. If it then detects a face, it automatically starts tracking, regardless of whether you start recording. As always, you can use the joystick to adjust the position of the subject. You can stop tracking by pressing the joystick and start it again by pressing the joystick twice. This feature is certainly well suited for vlogging. But remember what I said earlier, active tracking can cause slight jerkiness when walking or running. And here's another interesting thing. When you take a shot in selfie mode, the image doesn't look like it does on the display. Instead, the actual image is mirrored. You can see that clearly here. If that bothers you, you can activate Selfie Flip here. Now the image is mirrored and looks exactly like it does on the display while shooting. The Pocket 4P comes with an accessory that's especially useful for solo creators, the Frame Tab. The Frame Tab is included in the Vlog combo and is identical to the Frame Tab for the Osmo Mobile 8P. That's why you can also connect an existing Osmo Mobile 8P Frame Tab to the Pocket 4P. You turn on the Frame Tab using the button on the left side, and it automatically searches for compatible devices. If you swipe down from the top, you can select the Pocket 4P under Device Connection. With the Frame Tab, you can control the gimbal remotely. The joystick has similar functions to the one on the camera. You can start tracking a subject with a double tap on the display. You can also use the Frame Tab to zoom, start and stop recording, and change a few settings, such as the gimbal mode. You can also switch between cameras using the button on the left side. What you can do is change the recording settings. You'll need to charge the frame tab separately. To perform a firmware update, connect the frame tab to the DJI Memo app. A particular strength of most DJI cameras is that you can connect a wireless DJI microphone to the camera without a receiver, giving you very good audio quality. The Pocket 4P is compatible with the Mic 2, the Mic 3, the Mic Mini, the Mic Mini 2, and certainly with the upcoming DJI microphones. To connect a microphone, open the control menu and tap the mic icon here. As you can see, you can connect two microphones. Tap on one of the two fields. Now activate pairing mode on your microphone. The microphone should connect to the Pocket 4P and the LED on the microphone should light up blue continuously. This pairing is only necessary the first time. In the future, the two devices should connect automatically when they are turned on. You can also change several microphone settings here. We have already seen several features of the control menu, but this menu contains a few more very useful features that you should definitely know about. Apart from the presets, orientation and gimbal modes, use the icon at the bottom right to set the movement speed of the gimbal. In addition to the default setting, you can set it to slow for particularly smooth movements, or fast if you feel that the gimbal is responding too slowly to your movements, which is sometimes the case when tracking. And if the fill light is installed, you can turn it on and off here. Here you can also set whether the fill light should turn on automatically when taking selfies, and, very useful, whether the brightness and color temperature should adjust automatically. Incidentally, the fill light has two buttons. It turns on automatically when installed. With the left button, you can change the temperature of the light. The right button controls the brightness, and if you press and hold the right button, you turn the light off. This page also contains two other features that are extremely important. Today we have seen several times that the Pocket 4P is a great camera for solo creators, so for filming yourself. That's why it's useful to be able to start or stop recording or tracking from a distance. You can do this using the app, the frame tab, or for example with gesture control. If you activate gesture control here, you can start and stop tracking by raising your hand with the palm open. You start and stop recording with the peace sign. If you tap the C icon down here, you can customize the function of the right button below the display. As I said, I think it's set up quite well. With screen rotate and capture on the second page, you can specify that rotating the display not only turns on the Pocket 4P, but also immediately starts a recording. This can be very useful for starting a recording particularly quickly. So it's like a quick capture function, so to speak. Here at the top right, you can adjust the brightness of the display. At the bottom, you can change the volume of the sounds or activate auto media transfer. And on the third page on the far right, you can select the storage location for your recordings or format the SD card or the internal memory. As you can see, the Pocket 4P really has a lot of features and settings options. You can find more camera settings here in the settings menu on the first page. Today, I just want to show you one more setting. I think the gimbal reacts a little too sensitively and quickly to joystick movements. That's why you should set the gimbal speed to 2 under joystick speed here on the right. So far today, we've really only talked about video recording, but the Pocket 4P also takes excellent photos with a significantly higher resolution than those from the Pocket 3. Just like in video mode, there are settings for exposure and focus mode. For optimal image quality, you should adjust two settings. Swipe up from the bottom to activate the Super Photo mode. Only then will you get higher resolution shots with up to 37 megapixels. And especially if you plan to edit your photos heavily, you should enable JPEG and RAW. A RAW file contains more information than a JPEG file and can therefore be edited much better. But of course, you'll also need the right software for that. Well, we've now taken a few excellent shots. You now have several options for transferring your recordings. Of course, you can do this directly via the SD card, but you can also connect your Pocket 4P to a computer using a cable. Once you have connected the Pocket 4P via cable, you can choose between webcam mode and file transfer mode. Select the latter to transfer files to your computer. The last option for saving your recordings is to transfer them to your smartphone using the DJI Memo app. And with the new Auto Media Transfer option, this can even happen automatically. Once you've enabled the feature, new recordings will be automatically transferred to your smartphone via Wi-Fi as soon as you turn off the camera. To do this, however, you'll need to pair a new device first. Currently, this only works with newer iPhones. As mentioned at the beginning, the app offers a few very interesting additional features. For example, you can use the app to control the Pocket 4P remotely. The interface gives you access to more or less all of the settings we saw in this video. By drawing a frame around a subject, you can start active tracking of that subject. In addition to the usual recording modes, The app also offers a live stream mode. And of course, you can also edit your videos with the app. Under Album, you can edit individual recordings. Under Editor, you can create a project and combine and edit multiple clips to create a longer video. And One Tap Edit does this automatically using AI. Once you have finished recording with the Pocket 4P and turned it off, store it safely in the carrying pouch. I think you now have all the information you need to enjoy your Pocket 4P for a long time. Links to the Osmo Pocket 4P and the most important accessories can be found in the description. There will be more tutorials on the Pocket 4P, so stay tuned and see you next time.